Thank you, Mutaraj, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to chair this session and to welcome our speaker. We're privileged this afternoon to have with us Professor Kuruvilla Pandikattu. He is Professor and Dean in the Jnana-Deepa Institute of Philosophy and Theology in Pune in India, where he's Professor of Physics, Philosophy and Religion. And you will see in a moment that we have a very eminent speaker with us this afternoon with considerable experience. He has 3 master's degrees in physics and philosophy and 2 doctorates in philosophy and theology from the University of Innsbruck. He has written extensively on topics of science, religion, and philosophy. He's authored more than 45 books and over 200 scholarly articles, and has been involved in the dialogue between science and religion and between religions. His academic activities involve philosophical anthropology, the science-religion dialogue, and viable lifestyles. And he contributes to the role of science and technology and spirituality in fostering sustainable lifestyles. So you can see that our speaker this afternoon is, it's a privilege to have you with us. And now we switch to science this afternoon for the topic. And he'll talk to us on the title of Science, Figuring Out World Christianity and Nature. Kura, I'll hand over to you. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Keith, for the introduction, for the welcome. And I also want to thank the director, Mutturaj, for giving me this chance to be with you to share together some of our insights on science, religion, spirituality, and particularly the Christian way of understanding reality. I will share the screen, and I hope things are clear for all of you. So, science, figuring out world Christianity and nature. As Keith said, I teach philosophy at Jnana-Deepa. Jnana-Deepa in Sanskrit means the light of wisdom. Jnana is wisdom, Deepa is light. And for you to pronounce my name, that is very, very difficult. So people here call me just Kuru. And the name Kuru actually comes from the ancient Kyrios. Also the name Cyril comes. And the word Kuruvilla is partly taken from Aramaic, and that would mean the one who belongs to the Lord, Kyrios. With this introduction, allow me to go to the talk as such. I want to focus on 4 very important people, and I would be dividing this whole talk on 3 aspects of 3 nature. Figuring out the significance of physical nature. And here I would briefly elaborate on my mentor, Professor Job Korantadam. He is a Jesuit priest, and he was the president of our university. And he was the pioneer of science-religion dialogue in India. And then you have Professor John Pockinghorn. I'm sure you would all know him because he was a professor of mathematical physics at your university from 68 to 79, and then president of Queen's College. He is a physicist who became an Anglican priest in the year 2002. And he's the founder of he's the founder of the International Society for Science and Religion, and also the winner of the prestigious Templeton Prize. So these 2 people I would be engaging with to see the beauty, the depth of the physical universe we are in. Then I go to the biological nature, the biological reality of life. And for this, I have recourse to Professor Ignazimuthu, the Vice Chancellor of 2 of the universities, and he has been very much involved in biotechnological revolution. This part I would be very brief for want of time. The third one, the spiritual nature of reality, I would be taking Bede Griffiths. Bede Griffiths is a bridge builder between Great Britain and India. As a Christian, he came to India and he settled in India for about 40 years, lived in an ashram, in a hermitage, and we can call him rightly a mystic. So these are the 4 people I would be focusing on based on these 3 aspects of nature. And in all these, my humble attempt is to see that science and religion can enrich each other, and together they can search for better ways of living and better ways of finding solutions to our deepest yearning, our deepest spiritual quest. And with this background, I want to say the transfiguration, the whole side, but also of our inner world, we are in need of. Both as individuals and as community, we all need to change ourselves. And this can be done only when we can critically and meaningfully relate ourselves to the world of sciences. And going beyond, we also need to relate ourselves to the world of religions, whether it be Islam, whether it be Hinduism or Buddhism. Today, we Christians just cannot remain in our own comfort zones. We need to reach out. We may meet with opposition at times, but it is worth paying the price of opposition. Therefore, dialogue, encounter, which leads to widening of our consciousness for a better understanding, standing under with awe and respect, and a better understanding of ourselves and of the larger reality. That would be possible when we reach out to the world of science, the world of religion in a transfigured manner, so that we can change ourselves, transfigure ourselves. So much we did the introduction. In the first part, we'll be talking about the physical nature, then very briefly the biological nature, then the spiritual nature. Then we come up with some of the ways of figuring out this transformed and transfigured world in the light of Jesus, his life, his death, and his resurrection. And finally, some glimpse of our fulfillment, the finality, the completion of our human life, and how do we figure that out. Then we end up with a few words of conclusion. This is the basic outline of my presentation. Okay, physical nature. This I am sure all of you would have known it something basically. I want to focus on how the world of sciences began mostly about 500 years ago. And I want to focus particularly on Galileo, his faith, religious conviction leading to his scientific discoveries. And for this, I use the contribution of Professor Kodantad. While the other 3, We briefly start from the classical mechanics and relate to quantum mechanics, and then to theory of relativity, and then theory of chaos. And for all these three, I would be making use of the scholarly work of the priest physicist John Pockinghorn from Cambridge. Okay, first let us go to the classical physics, the classical mechanics. All of us know Kepler, or at least we have heard of him. But maybe we can begin with the Copernican Revolution of Nicolaus Copernicus, that Polish astronomer. Then Tycho Brahe. Then comes Johannes Kepler, whom we will study a little more detail. Galileo, all of us know. Okay, Isaac Newton comes much later, but it's good to keep track of these five great figures. The physical world, the material world of galaxies and skies of mud and slime. We may imagine that Nicolaus Copernicus was the lone astronomer who defiantly argued that it is the sun and not the earth which is at the center of the earth. His contribution was definitely significant. Therefore, we have the famous term, the Copernican Revolution. That was truly a revolution that made the earth no more the center. And so human beings need not be the center of the cosmos. From him, Brahe, when he was just 16 years old, he observed that the Jupiter, the trajectory of the Jupiter was overtaking that of Saturn. He was a man of meticulous observation and jotted down his findings, which later Kepler also made use of. He created models out of his observation, and some of these models were even better than that of Copernicus himself. And according to him, there he was wrong, but according to him, all the planets orbited the sun, but the sun and the moon orbited the earth. So here, of course, we know he was wrong, but otherwise he was partly right. And the discrepancies in the motion of the planet Mars could be explained through Brahe's observations and model. Then came Kepler from a very poor, modest family. He mixed sophisticated mathematics and astronomy with quite many mystical ideas, including astrology, alchemy, and so on. He worked for Brahe, and that is how he came out of his poverty to shine out as a great figure in the world of science. But Kepler's work and model would depart significantly from Brahe's, although he was working with Brahe. And as we all know, the most significant contribution of Kepler is that the solar system is there with the sun as the center, and the planets are moving as an elliptical trajectory, not a circular orbit. So this was the beginning of the classical mechanics and the scientific astronomy. Copernicus offered an important new model and a revised set of observational data. Brahe had left most of his data, but not all, to Kepler. And this is very interesting. Kepler's work on elliptical orbits played a key role in moving towards a different conception of the cosmos. And in formulating a different view of the cosmos, the individual scholars' dialogue between astronomers, theologians, and other scholars were significant. And I would wish that today too, we learn to dialogue with people of different disciplines and even different religions. And this kind of a dialogue would definitely enhance our common collective well-being. And it is here that I want to speak about the book of Kuruvilla, the discovery of Kepler's laws, the interaction of science, philosophy, and religion. And this was named the Outstanding Academic Book of the Year in 1944 by Choice magazine. And Job clearly says that his laws, Kepler's laws, were the first scientific laws to be discovered in the era of modern science, the beginning of it. Besides being a pioneer of empirical science, he also had strong philosophical convictions and religious commitments. So this is the key that Job wants to show. The empirical, the astronomical, the scientific data was to a large extent shaped, interpreted, and answered by his philosophical ideas and his religious insights, leading to the greatest discoveries of his time. Kepler's process of discovery was a result not just of his scientific abilities, but also of his philosophical and religious ideas. If this is true of Kepler, we can learn that we also need definitely science, but we need to learn also from our philosophical wisdom and religious inspiration. So, Job was able to identify all these three elements in Kepler's process of discovery, and he divided these into a sequence of different steps. Thus, the interplay between Kepler's science, his philosophical and religious ideas, and that each step was crucial for him to proceed towards the climax of his discovery. This was the basic insight of Job and his book. I just want to pause for half a minute. Is it okay this way of procedure? Is there any comments that you want to give me, maybe Keith, or is it okay?
No, it's okay. We're fascinated and pleased to listen to you.
Okay, then thank you. Now I come to the second part, that is John Pockinghorn of Cambridge. And I would be basing myself exclusively on this book. He has written more than 15 books, but I would be basing myself on exploring reality, the intertwining of science and religion. He starts with the normal assumption that quantum theory is different from classical physics because it is indeterministic. And then it deals with the probabilities than with certainties. So here we are moving from classical mechanics to quantum mechanics. Pockinghorn would agree with the second half of the statement, but he would say the first half is not necessarily correct, that quantum theory is different from classical physics because it is indeterministic. That, Pockinghorn would say, is not necessarily correct. Now, probabilities do occur in quantum mechanics. Now, there are two ways of understanding or interpreting these probabilities. One is that of intrinsic indeterminism. That would mean that in the world of quantum mechanics, and if so, also in the larger world, in the macrocosm, indeterminism is necessary, is intrinsic, unavoidable. The other way of looking at this probability is because of the ignorance of all the relevant details, because we are ignorant of some of the details, the hidden variables, quantum mechanics deals with probabilities. So these two ways of looking at the probability. The majority of the physicists led by Niels Bohr, the Danish physicist and one of the co-founders of quantum mechanics, would follow this line of argument, that there is something intrinsic in the world of quantum mechanics, that things are not deterministic. So that Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is to be understood as a principle of real indeterminacy at the ontological or metaphysical level. But at the same time, we know the American physicist David Bohm, he holds a different view, and he would say that the underlying dynamics of quantum mechanics is so totally deterministic, but the actual outcome depends on other factors called the hidden variables, to which it is impossible for the experimentalists, the observers, to gain precise epistemic access. So there is probability according to David Bohm because our epistemic access is limited. We do not have access to all the variables. So, according to him, the uncertainty principle is simply a principle of unavoidable ignorance. It is epistemological. The uncertainty principle is epistemological and not metaphysical. The choice between Bohm and Bohr cannot be made on empirical grounds. This is Pockinghorn arguing. The choice between the two interpretations, Bohm and Bohr, cannot be done on empirical grounds, but on because they give the same interpretations and the identical predictions. And therefore, he would conclude, questions relating to causality, to the probability, to indeterminism cannot be settled strictly on scientific grounds, but it calls for a metaphysical assessment. And when we talk about a metaphysical assessment from a philosophical point of view, for us Christians, we can say it calls ground for a theological assess of reason and faith, an agreement in terms of our faith, but that is beyond us just now. So, to continue our understanding of the relationship between classical mechanics and quantum mechanics, Bohr plays a grandfatherly role of being the philosophical guru of the new physics. By the way, all of us know Albert Einstein, who was also one of the co-founders of quantum mechanics, was precisely disillusioned with quantum mechanics and Bohr's understanding of the same. Therefore, Bohr emphasized that physical knowledge comes to us from experimental measurement, and that all measuring apparatus is classical in its behavior. This is what Pockinghorn would clearly point out. Although Bohr agrees that at the quantum level, there is indeterminacy, he would say that the measuring apparatus, the instruments, they behave in a classical manner. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get the results. So, quantum theory was about what happens in a world containing these pieces of classical measuring apparatus. So, in a world of quantum mechanics, we need to assume the existence of the measuring apparatus which are of classical dimension. So, what could be said about experiments with electron? Not with what electrons actually were in themselves. That is what quantum mechanics is busy with. Exploring the experiments and what the experiments yield, not what the electrons actually are. Therefore, we have the quote from Bohr himself. There is no quantum world. There is only abstract quantum physical description. It is wrong to think that the task of physics is to find out how nature is. Physics is concerned with what we can say about nature, what we can together collectively say about nature. Physics is not concerned about nature in itself. This is a radical statement from a positivistic position. In this way, Bohr and his colleagues assert that science is simply concerned with talking about the results of experimental measurements, not with the nature of reality in itself, only about talking about and arriving at a consensus as far as the experimental measurements are concerned. But we do know, or whatever be the position of Bohr, most of the scientists hold that their labor is worth only because they know something about the real world. Therefore, Pockinghorn would hold a realist position that the world outside is real, not just a matter of my mental perception alone. And Bohr divides the world into two parts: the accessible realm of classical measuring apparatus and the inaccessible realm of quantum entities. They should always be considered together in a mutually engaging manner, and what he calls the phenomenon. Those reliable instruments in the laboratory are themselves composed of quantum constituents. Pockinghorn reminds us there are not two distinct domains, but ultimately there is only one physical world. Then comes the relationship between quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity. For more than 80 years, scientists have been trying to bring these two, the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics, together, but there is not much hope even now, even with the appearance of the string theories. The quantum fuzziness would always be there. I'm sorry, I'm going a little fast because I have got to come to the last part. I have only about 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, the quantum mechanics is the most successful theory humanity has ever produced. It yields beautiful predictions we can make not just experimental predictions, but things of practical consequences. While the most beautiful theory, aesthetically beautiful theory, is that of Einstein's relativity theory. Unfortunately, we just cannot reconcile both these theories, although both of them enhances our understanding of the physical nature of the universe. There is a mismatch. Einstein would say, no, we have to wait for another theory that would combine both these. Both would not agree. Okay, now a little bit about quantum mechanics and the theory of chaos. The French mathematician Henri Poincare's contribution. What is essential is to note that there is sensitive dependence to initial conditions when it comes to weather, forecasting of weather, when it comes to the way the stock markets behave, or how the blood flows in our veins. The slightest variation in the initial conditions totally change the outcome. This is what the theory of chaos says. And unfortunately, Pockinghorn would show that both these theories also cannot be reconciled. Theory of chaos, in a very, very simplified manner, would say there are as many disorderly clouds in the world as there are orderly clocks. Chaotic system does not speak about utter chaos. It is ordered chaos, chaos limited to a particular way. Yet Lawrence was the first one to come up with this theory recently, when he was actually modeling the forecast of the weather. Tiny initial variations, they completely yielded different outcome behavior. That is what this theory of chaos would say. And Pockinghorn would show it is difficult that the quantum theory and the chaos theory to fit together. Now, these are just summing up. James Clerk's book, The Chaos Making a New Science, is simple, and at the same time it is profound. You have heard about the butterfly effect. A tiny flap of the butterfly's wing can cause hurricane, say, after 2 or 3 years, 2,000 kilometers away. So this is the butterfly effect. While the fractals, you get plenty of beautiful images, the same all the way down. Fractals denote the roughness, the curvature of the real world. So when we refer to these world of astronomy, of quantum mechanics, the theory of relativity and the theory of chaos, we do know that the reality, the physical world, is truly subtle, complex, and many times counterintuitive. Especially quantum mechanics teaches us. When it comes to the biological nature of the world, it is fascinating to dwell on the life, origin, evolution, and now synthetic biology and artificial intelligence. The miracle that we are aware of things we can feel with the 5 senses and also with our brain, that we human beings are privileged to be conscious of ourselves. This is a unique biological gift that we are proud of. Professor Savarimathu Ignasimathu, he has been identified as one of the top 1% of the scientists in the whole world. And he has got about 800 research papers, 12 Indian patents, 100 students who completed his doctoral degree, one species is named after him, and also a natural molecule is named after him. And recently he has developed the Savior Herbal Hand Sanitizer. He has got about 15 books on biotechnology. This book I'm just showing because it is initially published from Oxford. And besides his biotechnology contributions, he is also involved in fostering values, purpose, vision, contentment, and fulfillment. These are some of the other books that he has authored on values for life, skills for effective life, ecology, environment, etc. So basically, I want to say that there is so much the biological world can offer so that we can be truly enamored from that biological world. When it comes to spiritual nature, I want to focus on Bede Griffiths. Initially, he was an agnostic. Then he became a monk, and finally he died as an Advaita. Advaita would mean not two. Not two, but it is also not one. This is the essential relationship in Hinduism between God and human being. God and human being, they are not two, nor are they one. So there is something of a negative theology here. And this Griffiths is a bridge builder between India and Europe, Christianity and Hinduism, Western science and Eastern mysticism. Alan Richard, that was his name, the youngest of the 4 children of Griffiths' family, was born at Walton-on-Thames in England. Of course, you would know this place much better. In 1925, at Oxford, he joined the Magdalen College, and his interaction with the miners' strike, and he says, "My faith in socialism and any form of political action soon declined as I began to question the whole character of our civilization." The whole character of our civilization. He was lucky to have C.S. Lewis, all of you have heard of him, one of the intellectual giants of that century, as his tutor, who became both his guide and friend. Then his readings on Keith and deepening of his experience with nature. So it is a kind of a nature mysticism that led him towards God. To quote, "My experience at school in the presence of nature seemed to be the one real thing in my life to which I constantly returned, and I thought that poetic imagination was the one means by which one could make contact with reality." Poetic imagination to make contact with reality. Then they had a motor tour starting from Cambridge up to Lake District of Wordsworth, and there he had similar experiences which are mystical and connected with nature. He writes, "We felt that here among the hills we could find that communion with nature in which the source of all beauty was to be found. I went once alone among the hills when a mist began to gather, and I felt myself alone in that mysterious solitude, as though I had been at the bottom of the sea, cut off from all the haunts of men. And once again, the sense of that presence which I had experienced at school took possession of me. But such experiences were never more than transitory." He writes these in this first autobiography of his, The Golden Strings. And the second autobiography is titled, significantly, The Marriage of East and West. So, agnostic, when he was a student, he completed his training in Oxford in 1929. In 1931, he embraced Catholicism and he joined the Carmelite order in 32, ordained a priest, came to India in 1955. He settled down in the southern part of India in a monastery which he himself founded, that was called Shantivanam, the forest of peace. And then he died at the age of 86. 38 years he spent in India. Now, in this second autobiography, The Marriage of East and West, he writes, there are signs already that this new consciousness, a consciousness that embraces everything, is beginning to dawn as the West comes in contact with the East. The age of scientific materialism, which dominated the 19th century, is passing, and a new age of spiritual wisdom is coming to birth, and Western science itself has prepared the way for this new emergence of consciousness. So, a consciousness which is cross-cultural, which leads to a dialogue between Eastern spirituality and Western science. And that's why one of his books, A New Vision of Reality, the subtitle is very significant. The subtitle is Western Science, Eastern Mysticism, and Christian Faith. And there, he proposes a paradigm for a synthesis or a unifying plan that helps Christianity to enlarge its horizon and to recognize the limited character of its original revelation. He affirms that Christianity is a unique revelation of Jesus Christ. And although it was conditioned by the circumstances of its origin, the revelation has a unique message for the whole world. Therefore, it is universal. But conveying this message does not imply an imposition of the structures which it has developed during the centuries of its growth, especially in the West. Therefore, he calls for a cosmic universal religion that would actually embrace not only every religion, but the whole of the universe. And towards the end of his life, he appears to go much deeper than holding dialogue between Hinduism and Christianity. He is attracted by other religious traditions, opening himself to new horizons. He appears to be propelled by the spirit at work around the various cultures and within himself. Dalai Lama actually wrote the foreword to his second book. And towards the end of his life, he had a deeper experience of Advaita, the intimate relationship between me and God, and also the discovery of the feminine dimension in his life. Having experienced the deep Indian culture and religion, he returned to the West to share the fruits of dialogue with the East, which he finds is collapsing and in the throes of a rebirth. And there, working with small communities consisting of men and women, married and single, seeking in a new lifestyle which will be in harmony with nature and with the inner law of the spirit. There, he discovers the mystery of love, and it reveals itself to love alone. And this is attained by self-surrender on the cross. So, a consuming flame of benevolence, that is what love of God is. It's not just mild benevolence. From an agnostic to a committed Christian to an Advaitic, where he has experienced oneness, was open to other religion, including sciences, and he finally embraced the whole of reality. Keith, how many minutes more I have? Please unmute yourself.
another 5 minutes, another 5 or 10 minutes, maybe maximum.
Okay. Thank you. So the fourth section, figuring out the world of nature transfigured. Some implications. We need to explore the reality. We need to encounter the reality much more profoundly. That is exactly what the mystics and the artists experience. Both the artists and the mystics, they experience reality in a much more profound sense. While most of us are satisfied to live our ordinary life and to live at that superficial level without really grasping the whole of reality. And then we need to befriend the other religious traditions, the other sciences, the other disciplines. Today, to be religious is to be interreligious, to relate to other religions, other cultures, other disciplines, because reality is like a rhizome with so many roots. A tuber has got too many roots. Therefore, we cannot deal with the world with our two-valued binary logic of true or false, black and white. Reality, the chaos theory has shown us, is multidimensional, it is fuzzy. And in this process of being religious, we need to embrace the other. Even our rivals, the so-called enemies, we need to dance to the diversity that is present in our human family. Martin Luther is right. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. Rilke, we need to live the questions. The search continues. The answer comes gradually. We need to live the question, live everything, live the questions now. So far, we have focused on the physical nature, Job and Pockinghorn, biological nature, Ignacy, spiritual nature, Beat Griffiths, figuring out the world so that we can transform ourselves, and now figuring out our fulfillment, the eschatological oneness that we look forward when we are one with a new creation which Jesus has promised. The relationship between this earthly life and the heavenly life is much more intricate, intimate. The earthly well-being, security is good, but that should lead to a spiritual fulfillment, an eschatology which is already present but not yet realized. Again, Pockinghorn speaks about the salvation of the aliens, those people from Mars or Jupiter. But based on that, what Pockinghorn spoke, we also need to consider the salvation of the other religionists. 500 years ago, we could easily say all those heathens and pagans will die and go to hell. But we realize that today we need to understand our fulfillment in a holistic manner, because Jesus or God has come to create a new earth, a new heaven and a new earth with a new creation. The whole creation is yearning for the newness. Therefore, to conclude, like Pockinghorn, we really can hold on to a critical realism. The world outside is real, not just in my mind. And Emerson's statement is beautiful. The wonder is that we can see these trees and not wonder more. If you replace the trees with the world, inside and outside, the wonder is that we can see these universes and not wonder anymore. If we are transformed and committed Christians, if we have experienced the transfiguration of Christ, then we need to wonder still more. We need to learn to bear the pain of evil than that of sin. And that hopefully would be transformed by love, unconditional absolute love experienced in Jesus Christ. So, the crucified Lord, the unconditional love of Him transforms everything everyone, including our own enemies. Saint Gregory is right. What is not assumed is not redeemed. And as Christians and as followers of Christ, the challenge is to assume everything, so that we can redeem the world in and through Christ, through love. Thank you very much.